On January 22, 1912, Henry Morrison Flagler fulfilled a dream he'd been pursuing for decades. He rode his own iron into Key West. Flagler was 82 years old and almost blind, but he had made it. Henry Flagler was used to the world taking notice of his accomplishments, but even he was overcome by the greeting he received when his private rail car pulled into the station at Key West that morning. There were businessmen and politicians from across the state, foreign dignitaries from throughout the Caribbean and Latin America, and more than 10,000 people from the island, all on hand to cheer Flagler and his first train from the mainland. The old man was truly touched. In speeches and at celebrations that lasted a week, he was praised to the skies. He alone had done what no one else had been able to do. He'd taken on America's last frontier and pushed it back as far as you could go. It's now been a century since Henry Flagler linked the state of Florida end to end with his railroad and chain of luxury hotels. What was then, in many places, waterlogged, bug-infested wilderness is now home to 19 million people, most of whom live in cities and towns that didn't even exist when Flagler was alive. The story of the century Flagler launched is the story of this stunning transformation. During this time, no state in the country changed more quickly, more dramatically, or came to symbolize the American dream in the way Florida did. And now, 100 years down the line, it's a story that has all of a sudden taken a turn in an uncertain direction. On his first trip to Florida in the late 1870s, Henry Flagler traveled to Jacksonville with his wife Mary, whose doctor had sent her south for the winter to treat her ailing lungs. Flagler was one of the richest men in America at the time. He was a principal of Standard Oil, which he'd built working side by side with John D. Rockefeller. Even for one of the country's wealthiest families, Florida was difficult to get to in the years after the Civil War. It was a 90-hour trip from Flagler's home in New York City to Jacksonville. There were two ways into the state from Savannah, and it was said whichever one you chose, you'd wish you'd taken the other. While hard to reach, Jacksonville was a bustling commercial river port with a thriving resort business. A small clutch of downtown hotels catered to a clientele of mostly wealthy Northerners and invalids. After a few weeks in Florida, the Flaglers returned home. Mary appeared rejuvenated by her vacation, but soon took a turn for the worse. She died in New York in the spring of 1881. 2 years later, Henry Flagler returned to Florida on his honeymoon with a new wife, Ida Alice Shorts, who'd been one of Mary's nurses. They visited Jacksonville again, and then decided to take a riverboat tour up the St. Johns to the picturesque village of St. Augustine on the coast.
They went to Jacksonville first and then on down to the hamlet of St. Augustine, and liked it. And Flagler, he didn't care very much for the quality of the hotel in St. Augustine, so he did what anybody with his amount of money would do. He decided to build one that he would like staying in.
Henry Flagler kind of looked like a taller version of the Monopoly Man. He had that very dignified look, high forehead. He liked top hats, had that luxuriant mustache, kind of had a bit of a dandy look, but of course he really worked like a man obsessed. He was very serious man.